and a guy named Norman Miller. He was another of these social scientist Yiddishists, like Arkadiusz Gahan at the University of Chicago, whom he had been friends with, and that's how we sort of got to be friends. He was, along with Len Prager, was the founder of the Mendele Review, and he took a liking to me and an interest in my way of talking or thinking, and he invited me to review a translation for the first issue of the Mendele Review. The Mendele itself is just a listserv for people who want to talk about Yiddish. Mendele Review was founded in order for people to write somewhat longer and more scholarly pieces about aspects of Yiddish. Because there were a lot of scholars in that group of people who liked to talk about Yiddish or speak Yiddish. And Norman invited me to review this work, Golda Werman's translation of some stories by David Bergelsen, and then he lent me his copy of Bergelsen's stories, which I didn't have that many Yiddish books, and I wasn't starting to grab them from the Yiddish Book Center or whatever. Heaven knows they weren't available online. And I looked at it, and I think that in entirely good faith, I thought, this is crazy. This is a travesty, because there were all these unnecessary, gratuitous, arbitrary changes which weren't really explained by Werman's preface and seemed to me to make the story considerably worse. And it wasn't one of those, Bergelsen's text wasn't a text where you had to reconfigure it in order to make it work. You could keep his paragraphing and his sentence structure, and you didn't have to reorder the information. It worked fine. And Joseph Sherman's translation of the story Opgang, published some years later, does all those things, and it's really great. So I wrote that, and I attribute to that review quite a lot of what brought me into the Yiddishist world. It certainly wasn't the translation. That wasn't the translation of the Singer story that I published. What happened was, you probably know this, but in the Yiddishist world, people don't like to say bad things about other people, and especially about translators of Yiddish, because, as it says on the back cover of the Penguin Anthology of Modern Yiddish Verse, every translation of a Yiddish poem is a blow struck against the pernicious effects of the Holocaust, right? And that's true, by the way. It's really important to translate this stuff. So by and large, people don't say this is a terrible translation, because the impulse to say, isn't it wonderful to have this in English, dominates over the impulse to say this is a terrible translation. And as courteously as I could, I said, this doesn't work as a translation. You can't get Bergelsen from this translation. That unusual review in the Yiddishist world caught the attention of David Roskis, whom I knew slightly, but I don't know how, who then started inviting me to join things. He invited me to join the advisory board of the Library of Sholem Aleichem in English translation, which never produced a volume, but I met a lot of people. And David had appointed me as what Seth Wallace called the Savonarola of translation, which meant that it was my job to read all the extant translations of Sholem Aleichem and say whether I thought they could be used in the series or whether we needed new translations. So I did a lot of translation examining, and I wrote a piece about it. Actually, it came out of reviewing those translations that was published later in the Pakenträger. Then David invited me to join the advisory board of the New Yiddish Library, which meant also more connections with Aaron Lansky. Yeah, right. And, I had become a person who spent a lot of time opining about or judging translations of Yiddish literature. And since translation fascinates me, and since I hold a number of views and principles in that area. And since Yiddish fascinates me, I love doing these pieces. And I did an essay review for a proof text when Joseph Sherman's translation came out. So I was in this czar-like position, which I didn't entirely like, because every theorist of translation should do enough translation that other people can critique his or her translations just as he or she has been critiquing theirs. So I did some more translations that emerged from my connection with these enterprises.